Hello, I'm Anthony. Today I want to share with you some tips and tricks on how to play the guitar with small hands. I have small hands. Let's do some science to prove that. I have dimensions of all of my fingers. Compare them with yours if you feel inclined to do so. You're going to see that this is an objectively small hand. In addition to the length of the fingers, there's another very important measurement that you need to make if you're trying to determine whether or not you suffer from small hands. And it's the distance from the tip of your thumb to the tip of your forefinger. The guitar has a curved neck. Your hand is curved. The more of this space that's taken up with the guitar neck, the more of a problem that you've got. And having a small span from here to here is going to handicap you. So it's worth dealing with that elephant in the room first. Big-handed people who tell small-handed people that small hands aren't a problem don't know what they're talking about. They haven't got small hands. I do. I can tell you that it is a problem, but it's a solvable one. So this here is a fundamental thing. No stretching is going to make that any bigger. True, if you stretch your fingers far out as far as they'll go, well, let's do that. Then they're going to be very slightly longer than if you curve them in a natural position. Let's do that. Let's tape a piece of wire to the inside of our hands to find out how big that span is and how much it compares with the stretched one. Let's stretch that piece of wire out and kind of do some measurements. Let's science the hell out of this thing so that we can put to bed once and for all that this thing that you're looking at is a small hand. Okay, so I think I've got my credentials out of the way. I'm entitled to talk on this subject with some authority now. So how do we manage it? Well, the first point might not be very popular with you because I'm going to consider whether or not you have the right guitar. I very carefully chose this guitar. This is an Ibanez JS 1000 and it has certain attributes that suit me perfectly as a small-handed guitarist. The first one is the thickness of the neck. It's a really narrow neck profile. The width of the nut is actually the same as a Fender Strat, so it's not particularly narrow, but it's certainly nowhere near as wide as a Les Paul, for instance. The other thing that this guitar has going for it, and this is really quite unique, the Ibanez JS range have a profiled neck plate. It's narrower on the high string than it is on the low string, so it's easier for your hand to wrap around. So playing this guitar feels like wearing a glove. It's just so comfortable, so easy to play. So your choice of physical instrument is inevitably important. If you're physically debilitated in some way, and for the purpose of playing the guitar, a small hand is a disadvantage, then mitigate that problem by buying a guitar that's going to help you out as much as possible. I have seriously considered in the past buying a 3/4 length guitar, but in the end I find that I can play a full-size guitar perfectly well with all of the other stuff I'm going to talk about today. And so this is my perfect compromise. This is my tool of choice. Okay, so with that difficult conversation out of the way, let's talk about how we actually play the instrument we do own. The first thing is to ensure that your hand is always as relaxed and comfortable as possible. Now, this is true for hands of all sizes, but as you'll see in the various demonstrations I'm going to give today, it's absolutely essential that you find the sweet spot, exactly where are you supposed to hold the guitar. And the most important rule is to keep your wrist as straight as possible, both in this direction. We don't want to see this, we don't want to see this, and we don't want to see it twisting to the side either. We're going to need to keep it as straight as we possibly can. Now, because all of your dimensions as a small-handed guitarist are more constrained, that's going to require us to be much more careful about how we position the guitar. So I'm going to kind of relax my arm as much as possible. I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to keep the elbow close to my body. That's another generally very important thing to do if you want to kind of keep your arm as relaxed as possible. Just bring it up. And where does the guitar naturally want to sit? Well, my guitar wants to sit about there. So now if I position myself to play an A major chord, the fingers just naturally fall onto the frets and all of the notes sound without any buzz or hum or pain or difficulty. I can reach that chord really easily. So that's kind of position number one, because it's just about the easiest chord physically to play when your hand flops up onto the fretboard. Kind of just naturally forms an A major. Okay, so now keeping my fingers on the A major chord, I'm going to move the guitar in various positions and try to get to the position where my wrist is as straight as possible. So if I kind of angle so that you can see my wrist, and I need to talk into the microphone as well, As I bring the guitar down so that it's now parallel with the floor, my wrist is badly bent. As I bring the guitar up, my wrist naturally straightens. So in conclusion, being good scientists, the higher the guitar head, the more on level with your eyes it is, then the straighter your wrist is going to be. So here I am, kind of just naturally arose to the point where my eyes are directly level with the very tip of the top of the guitar. And if we have a look at my wrist, almost perfectly straight. The least amount of stress on my wrist. So head nice and high. Play the chord nice and comfortably. Point number 2 for digit positioning, I nearly said finger positioning, but this is actually something to do with your thumb. Have a look where the thumb is on the guitar. So at the moment it's right in the middle of the neck. The pad, the joint of the thumb is actually touching the truss rod wood running through the middle of the neck. So let's leave that as, kind of call that default position. Now I'm going to pull the thumb up into sort of Jimi Hendrix position. Have you ever seen Jimi Hendrix play? His thumb is absolutely flapping over the top of the fretboard. You can't do that. If you're a small-handed guitarist, don't try to play like that. It's not going to work. You can't do this kind of playing bass notes with your thumb position. You just don't have that luxury. Let it go. Let's move on. So here's my thumb in the middle of the neck, playing an A major chord. Everything nice and comfortable. I have a little bit of gap in the hands. Gap is good. That gives me flexibility to be able to reach other notes. As my thumb comes further up the neck, that gap closes. Remember the curvature from your thumb to your forefinger. The more of that you steal by wrapping it around the neck, the less you've got access to for reaching the frets. So, in conclusion, doing good science, if we bring the thumb closer to the front of the fretboard, so now I'm pushing the point by bringing it really quite close to the top of the neck. That gives us the maximum amount of flexibility with which to reach the frets with our fingers. The problem with that is that then introduces wrist bend. So once again, thumb in kind of, let's get myself quite natural, fairly natural position. As the thumb comes up to give my fingers more reach, I'm bending my wrist more. So that's a bad thing. So we need to find, again, a perfect compromise, the best compromise that we can between these two issues that are basically competing against each other. We don't want to bend the wrist, but we do want to have maximum flexibility. Well, the trick is to make the thumb as relaxed as you can possibly be. Basically have it float in a very relaxed, sort of free manner underneath the fretboard. Don't ask your thumb to do anything specific. Very often you'll see guitarists say use your thumb as an anchor. Well, sometimes you don't have that luxury, because in order to reach the frets that you need to reach, you've kind of had to compromise that wrist position by bending it too far, by bringing the thumb too far forwards. But if you leave it as relaxed as you possibly can, and you take a little bit of that anchoring role away from the thumb and use your body instead, then you'll find that you're able to relax a little bit more. So when I play this A major, rather than pushing on the neck with my thumb, what I'm actually doing is I'm pulling with my fingers and with my right arm. So I'm basically kind of virtually bending the guitar in half. So I can now play the chord with my thumb not even touching the neck. Not that I would, that's not a particularly sensible thing to do, but it just proves the point that you don't actually need that anchor. You use a little bit of stress from your body to take away that strain that your thumb is. It's more difficult for the thumb to do the work that big-handed people can ask it to do, because you've lost some of the compromise of this kind of hook that's coming around the back of the neck. So in conclusion, very relaxed thumb, sat pretty much in the middle of the neck most of the time. Now it will float around over here if I'm soloing, because in order to reach that fret, I actually have to twist quite badly if I want to keep my thumb underneath the guitar. It's much more comfortable for me to grip the guitar far more fully. How am I able to do that when we've already discussed bending of wrists and all sorts of other convoluted stuff? Well, the secret to that positioning is rotation of your wrist. We're keeping it straight at all times in both planes, but we are allowed to rotate it. And it's much more comfortable to play the guitar if your wrist is pointing more to the floor than it is to the back of the neck. So let's demonstrate that point. Here's my wrist completely perpendicular to the guitar neck. If I try to play some sort of run-up with these fingers perpendicular, it's almost impossible. I just can't stretch, my hands aren't big enough. Even if I bring the guitar right up here, I can't do it. If I rotate the wrist, however, so that now it's pointing kind of at the floor behind me, my fingers are much more angled and they fall onto the frets much more comfortably. In this position, the thumb does pop up to the top. Here it is. To show you how useful it is to rotate your wrist towards the floor, I'm going to play the 5th fret and I'm going to try to play the 9th fret. So those are the 2 notes that I want to play. So firstly, we start completely perpendicular to the guitar. It's almost impossible. I can't get the thumb anywhere near the neck, and it really does want to be on the neck. For kind of solo playing, absolutely no chance. And I'm only able to touch this fret with kind of the pad middle part of my little finger. That's really quite painful. I can't do that for too long. Now I'm going to rotate the wrist so that my finger is almost running up the neck. So I start at kind of 45 degrees. I've gone to the maximum extent. And my wrist is twisted round as far as it can go. Now I'm not saying this is easy, but I can now do it. The reason for that is really simple. You just hold your wrist straight and span your fingers. Stretch them as far as you can. You're going to get this distance. Let's measure it. Oop. Conveniently situated ruler. You can't see the measurements of the rule, but I'll stretch as far as I can. 12 centimetres. What's that in inches? It's about 4.5, 4¾ inches. Now if I twist the fingers and stretch them so that they're hooked, my wrist is still completely straight, totally relaxed. It's only my fingers that have twisted. And now the difference between those fingers is 140 millimetres. Did I say millimetres or centimetres earlier? Anyway, 140 millimetres, 14 centimetres, 5.5 inches. So I've got a bigger span by kind of twisting the fingers around. If I take that position and try to put it on the guitar with a perpendicular hand, things go horribly wrong. But if I rotate the hand so that it's pointing at the floor, now my fingers naturally fall down on the fretboard. So I'm gaining, 2 extra centimetres, but I'm also gaining the ability to actually play the frets. My fingers are now pointing in the right direction rather than over here where they're pointing in completely the wrong direction. Absolutely useless for any guitarist. Rotate your wrist, splay your fingers, you get a much bigger span. Now let's talk about the dreaded frets. Frets 1 to 4, these are the difficult ones. The stretches over here are so big, they're just really uncomfortable. So let's say you want to play the dreaded F major chord. Okay, that's quite uncomfortable for me to play. The stretch is so big. I'm actually a little bit low here because I'm trying to avoid the microphone. So I should be up here. I can do it. I can probably hold that chord comfortably for maybe 20 seconds. But I don't want to do it for that long. So I'm going to basically make some general principles of things to avoid under most circumstances. The first one is try not to play the low string. Let's play that F major chord without playing the low string. It means I no longer need to make a full bar. I can play the normal strings with my 3 fingers, but now my index finger is available to bar just the top 2 strings. I actually play without a plectrum, so I can damp the E string with my thumb, but basically, however you want to play it, just don't play that string. Perfectly functional F major chord. The bass guitarist is going to take care of the low note. I'm not too worried about that. That's going to serve me the vast majority of the times. If I want to make it even easier for myself, I can drop the high string as well, and then it becomes a really easy chord to play. Look at the angle of my hand. My fingers pointing kind of 45 degrees on the neck, rotated but not twisted. My wrist is still completely straight. Now I'm damping 2 strings with my, you can't quite see, there you go. So my thumb's damping the E string, my 4th finger is damping the top string, and I can play the 4 strings in the middle. Let's crank up the difficulty level. Try playing an F major 7. It's almost impossible for me to play an F major 7 in this position. I can do it. I'm having to press too hard on the frets. It's kind of gone out of tune because I'm pressing so hard on those frets. My knuckles, my fingertips are white, you know, everything is stressed, really difficult and uncomfortable. So I'm simply not going to play an F major 7 down there. It's ridiculous for me to even try. It doesn't matter how far, how high I hold the neck, you know, all of the various contortions that I go through. That's about as comfortable as I can make it. Laying my fingers down flat. It's taken me a few seconds to get into that position. That's not something I can do naturally in the middle of playing a song. I wouldn't dream of trying to play an F major 7 in first position. I would play it on the 7th fret. In fact, this is actually my favourite F major 7 position to play anyway. It just has a nicer tonal ring to it, but more importantly, from the small hand perspective, it's so easy to get to. Look at how easy that fingering is rather than this contorted. These frets are simply too big. Don't try to do something that's beyond your physical capacity. Move up the fretboard, find a different position in which to play the chord. The beauty of playing the guitar is that inversions and voicings are far less important for this instrument than others. I'm not saying that they're irrelevant, absolutely not. But don't try to play chords where you just can't physically do them. Find an alternative, find somewhere else to play it. The little finger or pinky is probably the most problematic of all of them for small hands because it's the smallest finger. If I'm playing an A minor 7 and I want to add a high G, which is that position on the B string, fret number 8 on the B string, I'm going to try to play that chord. Let's see if I can even physically do it. So there's the A minor 7. Now I'm going to bring in the 2nd G. It's always the ring finger that's the issue. It can't bridge far enough past the D string to let me get my little finger down on that fret. I can't do it. I physically can't do it, and now my wrist is sore. That 30 seconds I spent trying to form that chord, I just can't do it. So don't try. I don't ask my little finger, my pinky, to go past the frets that the other fingers are playing. If I really want to play this G, I'll find somewhere else on the fretboard to do it. There's one up here. So what was it? It was an A minor 7, so I'll play it there. Granted, I've got higher notes. Well, I don't have to play them if I don't want. It's just finding a compromise. This is an incredibly easy chord to play. This one is quite literally impossible, so don't attempt the impossible. Finally, a couple of things to mention about playing when sat down. When we talked earlier about how important it was to have your neck in exactly the right position, when you sit down, everything goes horribly awry. Your guitar is moving so that wherever this part of the guitar is going to sit on one of your 2 legs, unless you keep wearing your strap. I've currently got my legs on either side of the guitar. It's a little bit difficult for me to couldn't quite get the camera in position far enough. But basically, when I'm playing the guitar, I'm shouting at the microphone now, I'm wearing the guitar as if I'm stood up. It's not touching any part of my legs. That allows me to do all exactly the same as if I was stood up. It also helps me retain really good posture, because now my back is straight. I'm not kind of, hunched over the guitar as you very often are when you're playing sat down. Everything is perfectly formed. The guitar's hanging in exactly the same position and everything is just as comfortable as if I was stood up. So wear a strap when you're sitting down. So it can be done. I hope you found some of that useful. If you did, please hit the like button. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm and stuff. I'll see you next time. Thanks very much.